Okay. Okay, are we ready? Okay, everyone. Welcome to our Join the Conversation
Hi.
virtual forum. Hi, Elena. Thank you to everyone who's joining us.
Hi.
We're here tonight to consider the conversation around exploring an affordable housing overlay in Arlington. My name is Sarah Suarez. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. And we are going to be joined today by members of a citizen working group that are working on the engagement for drafting an affordable housing overlay. It's going to be an exciting evening. We have a lot of people registered, so we're really excited for the communication, for the feedback, and for everyone to participate. Our agenda for this evening, we'll review the affordable housing in Arlington as it is right now, where we're at. We'll discuss how an affordable housing overlay could line up with our existing plans and expressed desires that have been adopted over the past few years. We will discuss how affordable housing gets built. We'll have Erica Schwartz from the Housing Corporation with us to discuss as our resident CDC, not resident, sorry, as our CDC in town. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes, which is what everybody's here for. And we'll actually have the citizen working group discuss their proposal and then open it up for questions, feedback. We'll have plenty of discussion, so you can feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll get to as many, and then afterwards, we'll use our raise the hand function. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So I should say this will be recorded. It will be on our website, along with another affordable housing conversation that we had 2 weeks ago, exploring these strategies for creating more affordable housing. So please go to the Town of Arlington's affordable housing page, and you will be able to find all of these, including the slide deck. So Arlington's affordable housing. So the Arlington Housing Authority right now has a large sharehold of all of our affordable housing. They have 713 units of public housing that are housed in multiple buildings across town. These have been built in 1940s through 1983. They make up a large portion of it, but not nearly enough for what we need. Right now, there are 146 units of Section 8 vouchers. We have the Housing Corporation of Arlington has 151 units in their portfolio, which does not include an additional 43 units that will be built as part of their Sunnyside project. The town has another 292 units that have been approved either through our inclusionary zoning, meaning that for every 6 affordable housing or 6 developments, residential units that are built, we require that there be an affordable housing unit deed restricted in that. So that gives us another 292. But all of that really gives us a total of 1,200, just over 1,200 affordable units. Part of some of the studies that we've done in the past couple of years have shown that our need is actually much greater than that. We have 5,500, even more, that are considered housing cost burdened right now. And that means that they're spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing. So at 1,200 units, we're really only meeting 20% of that need. And there's only so much that can be done with the policies that we have in place right now. If we look at this slide, some of these I just want to point out, these are a refresher of the slides that we went over 2 weeks ago. So I'm sorry if some of this is repetitive, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding, where this is coming from, and where our conversation is headed. So about a quarter of our population needs affordable housing that the town is not providing. Many Arlingtonians are struggling with housing costs, and they are at risk of displacement, particularly our elderly households. We have about a third of our residents are making less than 80% AMI, which is our area median income. And in Arlington, for a one-person household, that's around $90,000, which is not nothing, but it's certainly not enough to get a place that you might need in Arlington. Our affordable housing a housing authority has long wait lists for affordable housing units. All of our new developments that are being built in town that have affordable housing units that go out for lottery, they have long wait lists. They have, hundreds of people applying for very limited amount of units. And people they just can't find affordable places to live in Arlington. So this isn't new to Arlington. Affordable housing has been an issue that has been planned for, and we are making progress towards improving our numbers. In 2015, we adopted our townwide master plan, which called for, we had an entire section on a plan for affordable housing and looking at different uses of our local resources for affordable housing. And finding ways to leverage those dollars. So we have the Community Preservation Act, where we get funds, usually around maybe a third of the funds are committed to affordable housing and housing rehabilitation. We also have CDBG funds that can be used for that. One of the recommendations that came out of the Arlington master plan was also to look into, ways that the town can continue to improve. So we've done a fair housing action plan in 2021, which encouraged zoning to help develop fair housing choices across our community. There was a recommendation in there to consider zoning flexibility for 100% affordable housing. That plan was adopted in 2021. In 2022, the town of Arlington adopted its housing production plan, which focuses on how we can build the housing and preserve the housing that we have, but also meet our needs for affordable housing. And they discussed, integrating affordable housing into all neighborhoods through reuse of existing structures and redevelopment of underutilized properties. The town has established an affordable housing trust, which is getting on its feet now and really starting to make an impact. And they adopted a 5-year action plan, which discussed several ways to accomplish their goals, including making a clear path for permitting of affordable housing in Arlington in order to encourage more housing. During 2022, the Affordable Housing Trust in the town of Arlington did a lengthy survey and community outreach at that time, and we had nearly 800 people respond to a survey about affordable housing, and of that 800, we had 75% of the respondents in Arlington saying that Arlington does not have enough affordable housing. The most popular strategy to help Arlington create and preserve more affordable housing really is going to come in the form of policy changes to incentivize the development of affordable and multifamily housing. It's a struggle that all communities are facing right now. Cost of living is high, cost of land is high, cost of development is high. So we have to look at ways that we can make it available for developers or CDCs, local nonprofits to come in and build to really increase that. And we have to look at strategic ways, and the town itself We have elected officials that have voted for more affordable housing many, many times. 94% of the town meeting members voted in November 2020 to establish the Affordable Housing Trust. 79% of town meeting members voted in 2021 to pursue a home rule petition to impose a real estate transfer fee to fund the Affordable Housing Trust. Unfortunately, that hasn't been passed at the state level. So that is not an option for us right now. And it's something that, you know, in the future, the Affordable Housing Trust would certainly hope that that would provide some more dollars for the Affordable Housing Trust to provide to subsidize some of the development that's going on. The Affordable Housing Trust 5-year action plan was adopted and includes a plan for creating more affordable housing. And one of those actions is providing predictable permitting. It's one of the things that we keep hearing over and over again from developers, that, you know, one of the big costs is not knowing what the permitting status is going to be, not knowing how long it's going to take to get permitted, not knowing you know, if you're going to get your subsidies for affordable housing. So, you know, having predictable permitting at least takes one of those steps and gives them a timeline that they can work with. All of this was adopted by the select board, with the support of the redevelopment board in 2023 at town meeting. A resolution was passed in support of an affordable housing overlay district. And one of the, I want to read a section from that. So bear with me for 1 second, everyone. But the select board supports this resolution affirming an important recommendation of the Arlington Housing Production Plan, previously approved by this board and the Arlington Redevelopment Board. Among the potential tools available to address the town's commitment to creating affordable housing, the Affordable Housing Overlay District is an effective measure for encouraging the development of affordable housing within identified areas in town. The specific details of an overlay ordinance are expected to be discussed and debated in future town meetings, but the board recommends this resolution as a means of affirming that this tool is important for achieving the town's goals. That's critical. That is, you know, it's again emphasizing that this is not something new that has just come up. This is something that, you know, the town and the community have been speaking about and are supporting the exploration of this overlay district. Can this look like in Arlington? So I should have looked at the slide. Sorry about that. So the select board voted in favor 5-0 to support this. And again, it was passed at town meeting with a 74% in favor vote. And here's where we're at. So the Affordable Housing Trust has developed part of their toolbox of ways to encourage affordable housing is, you know, we can see all of these, the darker gray boxes are ones that the community has access to. So we have a local housing authority, we have inclusionary zoning and Chapter 40B, we have an affordable housing trust, we have CPA and CDBG funds. Housing Corporation of Arlington has been a local developer, CDC with us. Accessory dwelling units, we are one of the earlier communities to adopt an accessory dwelling unit bylaw, and we are likely going to be amending our accessory dwelling unit bylaw the upcoming town meeting to comply with the new state legislation. We've adopted a real estate transfer fee. Unfortunately, that hasn't passed yet, and the next step in the toolbox is to explore an affordable housing zoning overlay. You know, one of the things that the Affordable Housing Trust has asked experienced affordable housing developers is what are things that we can do? How can we make this, what do you need to see happen in order to want to build in Arlington? And, you know, the biggest challenges are the permitting. You know, you can read the quote here. It's easy. Projects where town players can help fast track the land and financing and community support and permitting and transparency have our interest. You know, we need a clear path forward where folks know if they're going to build affordable housing, they know early on that a project is likely to be approved. The quicker they can get their permits and their approvals, then they can apply for the bigger subsidies. We are, you know, facing the realities of financial feasibility. So affordable housing at its core is really expensive to build. So we're looking at $400,000 to $500,000 subsidy per unit. And, you know, the town can't subsidize all of it. We need state help. We need federal help. We need developers to help build this. So HCA has been working closely with us. They've built quite a portfolio over the past couple of years. And they continue to look for properties and build. And we'll have Erica Schwartz from the Housing Corporation give her presentation as a developer looking at this and things that she has experienced in building in Arlington. So we'll turn it over to Erica.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah. And if you were at the prior forum, some of these slides might look a little familiar, but we thought they were important enough to review again. So just these are three of the Housing Corporation's more recent developments, or the one that's upcoming on Sunnyside. And it just gives a sense of when we first of all, how expensive these projects are. You can see 10 Sunnyside Ave in that third column in the middle. It's a total development cost of $33.5 million. And that line means every dollar we spend to build the housing. It's not just construction. It's also our attorney and our insurance and all the costs we have from day one until, you know, we can start moving tenants in that it costs to move that forward, including the cost of a zoning attorney and these other kinds of things. So the town has been vital in providing some funding to each of our projects. You can see that in the top line. And that's sometimes Community Preservation Act money, CDBG funds, I think a little bit of ARPA. It's not so important to us where the funds come from, but it's essential that we get them. Without them, the state who we have to go through for the vast majority of our subsidies will not approve a project if they don't think that the town is behind it. And part of the way you show you're behind it is by putting some money down. But if you look at to the very bottom line, for relative to the total development cost for each project, a relatively small amount has been invested by the town, although relative to what the town has to give, pretty significant amounts, but relative to the total development, it's relatively small, but it leveraged so much more money in state and federal subsidies that are essential to build these. So for a relatively small investment at the local level, we're getting a lot of money into Arlington that otherwise would be going to other communities. This is highly competitive money. If we don't get it in Arlington, it will be given to other projects in other towns. So we want to get whatever funds, you know, are deemed to be legitimately ours and worthwhile to invest in our community to create affordable housing here. And I think if someone taps one more time, there's that little box that's going to come up that really shows for, I think, every, you know, on average, based on these projects, every $28,000 the town puts in per unit, we're getting around $428,000 from these big subsidy pots. So it's a really great investment. And if we go to the next slide, and the projects we're talking about are projects that are being funded with the federal low-income housing tax credit program. It's called LIHTC. And all this to say is that these days, the vast majority of affordable housing is developed using this kind of subsidy. It's the biggest bang for the buck. It's the kind of subsidy you pretty much need in order to develop affordable housing today. Across the country, across Massachusetts, these are the kinds of projects that are being built because these are the financing structures that we have to build them. And to apply for this money, we go to the state, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. I'll refer to it as HLC. It used to be called DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, for those who are familiar with that. And I apologize if you hear any background noise I'm hearing in my house. I have some headphones I will put on as I talk. So every year HLC makes awards for affordable housing, and every year they have one round. Sometimes they'll have a second little round, and it's highly competitive, and they don't fund all the projects they get, not because for the most part they're not good projects, simply because they need to prioritize and fund the projects that get highest priority based on what they're looking for, because they don't have enough money to go around in any one round. So these next two slides are going to give a sense of what they're looking for. And every year the state puts out a document that it's very readable. It's called the QAP, the Qualified Allocation Plan. It's long but very readable, and it outlines what their priorities are and how they're going to judge which projects are going to get the most points and get that funding. So one in the top section here is simply, you know, what income category are you targeting? Low-income housing tax credit projects always have to be for families earning 60% of the area median income or below. And so the kinds of multi-unit developments we're talking about are generally going to be targeted for those incomes. But there's always also a restriction from the state to have a certain number of units for even lower income households, people earning at 30% of the area median income. Those are really important to include, but they're harder to fund. You need to have more subsidy, either when you develop the building or operating subsidy to support people's rents, because people at that income can't afford to pay as much rent as other people. And these developments, they can include higher income units, but the subsidies you get will be targeted for those units that align with the income cutoff. So you could have a project that had some market rate units. Your subsidies just won't subsidize those, but the building itself could if you want to have additional units that are at higher incomes. And then the next, targeting the greatest need. So currently the state has these 5 categories, and your project must align with at least one of them. The first one can be very difficult. It sort of takes a special kind of organization that might have special funding sources to target a higher percentage of units for extremely low income households, families earning less than 30% area median income. Number 2 doesn't align for Arlington at all. There is no part of Arlington that is considered a distressed or at-risk community. Preserving affordable housing is certainly relevant for Arlington, maybe not so much for our conversation tonight, because we're talking largely about how we attract development, how we make a zoning change, and that would largely be for new construction. But it could be possible that there's an existing building that is acquired and that there's some land by it that would allow for an additional units to be built. But generally speaking, tonight, we're probably talking about zoning that would make an easier path for, you know, an entirely new construction project. And the last 2, I think, are very relevant, providing family housing and opportunity communities, and that's defined as communities that have good education, are close to transit, have a lot of community benefits and amenities. Or the last one, be in communities where less than 12% of the housing is affordable. Arlington is now at 6 point something percent. So we are definitely below 12%, and they want to target communities that haven't done as much affordable housing as a share of their total, to direct dollars to build housing there. And then there's some other priorities. If you're serving people who are formerly homeless, if you're having enhanced, you know, physical accessibility in your building, that's going to be important and look good to the state. Moving on to the other categories on the next slide. We'll get there. Trying to remember if I can remember what the next topic was. I haven't memorized it. Is someone moving the slides? Well, I'll just keep talking because I have the other slide open on my computer, but you won't have a pretty blue chart to look at while I talk. So
Sorry, Erica.
that's okay.
Frozen, so we're working on it.
Well, I'll talk. I mean,
Marisa.
our slides are beautiful, but you know, the next slide looks similar to this one, but with different lines and different words. So other things that the state is looking for when they're deciding to fund these kinds of affordable housing projects are you ready? And is there local support? Is your budget ready? Is your town, you know, putting in some money? The state doesn't want to fund a project and set aside money for it and then discover that the town, you know, there's a lot of local opposition, or you thought you were going to get some money from the town and the town was like, actually, no, we don't want to do that. They want to make sure they fund something and it's ready to go. And then the next two lines are really about some really intensive standards that I think align very well with a lot of priorities that people have in Arlington. So quality and sustainability. The quality of your site. Is it a suitable place for housing, or is it next to, you know, some kind of waste or, you know, dumping site? And then there's also a lot of careful attention to the design. There's housing quality standards you have to meet. The reviewers at the state have architects who look at your designs and make sure that it's not undermining a quality of life, minimum unit sizes. So there's a lot of details that go into looking at the quality of your design and the quality of the site. And then sustainability. So, and that means both sort of environmental sustainability and also kind of green building. Like, are we creating a healthy environment for people to live in? And are we creating a building that's healthy for the environment? So you have to show that your project complies with the state's sustainable development principles. You pretty much have to have one of these certifications, Passive House Certified or Enterprise Green Communities or LEED Gold or Platinum. You have to have some proof that you have done the work and the research and shown that you are building a building that is truly highly energy efficient and healthy. They're going to look for universal design, you know, the kind of, for example, handlebars that anybody can use, you know, whether they have some arthritis or difficulty opening a door, or whether they're, you know, carrying a child in their arms and just have one arm to use. They want to see solar readiness. So there's all these areas in the quality of your building and the design and its relationship to the environment that they're looking for. And then these last ones, projects tend to be on the larger side. Using this kind of subsidy, which again is pretty much these days the only way to build rental housing, and kind of requires some economies of scale. So there's no hard and fast rule for the minimum number of units, but it's not going to work below 30 units, and probably you need to be, you know, above 30 to make these projects work. And they're going to look to see that there's a developer who's experienced, who as an organization is going to be around, you know, over time, and can be relied on to really do the project correctly. And they like to see that you have a team that includes minority or women-owned businesses. And then they want to look at the budget. They look very carefully to see that you have a reasonable budget, even though no budgets are reasonable today because construction is so overwhelmingly expensive, but they understand that. So reasonable within the crazy context that we're in, and that your fees are capped appropriately. So whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit like HCA doing the development, you build in a fee that you as the developer take for yourself. It's the payment you get for doing the development. And certainly for a nonprofit like HCA, that becomes a very important part of investing back in our organization so we can go on to do the next project and run our organization in general. And there's typically a percentage of your total budget you're allowed to take in a fee, and you can't take more than that. So there's a very careful review by the state, which is a benefit, because if we're thinking about creating a change to our zoning and some regulation around zoning that would allow for affordable housing, we can rely on some of this regulation that already exists and this review that already is happening at the state level, and refer to that in our own rules, instead of having to sort of create new rules that then locally we have to sort of get into the weeds with. So we can take advantage of the serious review that's already done there. I don't know, are the slides still difficult? There you go. So I think this is my last slide before I turn it over, and we'll actually hear about what is this overlay that we're, you know, this draft overlay idea that we're going to be promoting and discussing and describing and talking about. So why would it matter to have a more streamlined permitting process? And certainly speed, cost savings, and certainty are the biggies. Doing any kind of real estate development is very complicated. Doing affordable housing development is, you know, exponentially more complicated. At every point in the process, there's so many details to coordinate, weird complications to solve. There's so many factors that make these projects very just consuming in every way, of so many different kinds of resources. So if there's any area that we have control of that we can smooth over and make it easier, that's just one little area of complication and draining of resources that we can take and invest in working on the rest of the project. So to be more specific, as the slide shows, if we can have a more streamlined permitting process, things will go faster. And that means you might get into an earlier round with the state, get the funding sooner, and be able to move to construction sooner. If it's slower, it's possible you miss that one annual funding round. You're waiting a whole other year. You have to pay your insurance and your, other holding costs for your land. The people don't get to move into those units sooner because they're a year later. There's another complication that you've lost a year. The cost savings just of the process itself. So just going through an intensive zoning process can cost a lot of extra money for various consultants that you need to go through that process. You have a zoning attorney, you might have engineers coming to the meetings to provide information on studies. Your architects have to show up at each of those meetings and prepare for each one. And the more we can streamline that, the more we save a lot of time and money, not just from someone like myself who's, sort of managing the development, but also from all of the members of the team whose time we're using and then paying for. And then certainty sort of was mentioned before. HCA, we're here, we're of Arlington. Arlington is our place and our people, and like, we're going to develop here. This is why we exist. But other developers won't. They're not, of and for Arlington. And so, I think all of these factors matter, but I think especially for an external developer coming in, having more certainty is going to be a game changer for them. If they're going to invest a lot of time and energy and not be sure that they're going to be able to get that permit, that might just be a risk calculation that they don't want to make. So that's why, of all the things we can't control in developing real estate, here's something we can. And so, yes, I'm done. I'll turn it over to Sanjay. Sanjay and I and several others have been on a informal citizens group that's been researching and thinking about what is a possible proposal that we could bring to the public. And Sanjay is going to walk through that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do that. Thank you, Erica. And so I think, as Erica just said, right, this is introduce who is bringing you this proposal tonight. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk. Erica and Sarah have already really talked about what an affordable housing overlay can do. We're going to go through the guiding principles, and then we're going to talk about the details, and then we'll get to the questions and discussion. Erica's already really covered this really well, right? It's about reducing costs for building affordable housing. It's about making it simpler so that they get permits quickly, and it's about giving a certainty to affordable housing developers so that they will go ahead and acquire sites and build new affordable housing or convert existing. We want to create opportunities for affordable housing in more parts of Arlington. So what are the principles underlying, as an overlay like this, right? We have to require a high ratio of affordable homes. I think that's key, right? And non-negotiable. We have to set affordability requirements at the lowest level that can reasonably be expected to be financially feasible. We want to allow more projects to pencil out, and part of making them, financially feasible is by allowing increased height and flexibility on other dimensional requirements, by keeping in mind the differences in different neighborhoods. We want to prioritize energy efficiency and climate resiliency, to the greatest extent consistent with affordable housing production. We want to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want to create opportunities for meaningful public engagement and advisory review within a by right permission process. Okay, so those are sort of the main guiding principles here. So currently, right, how much affordable housing could we expect? What is this? Will this make a difference? Currently, we see in Arlington an affordable housing project once every 5 years receive state and federal subsidy. This is 3 projects that Erica just showed you, right? All developed by the HCA over the course of approximately 15 years, and that's great. But an affordable housing overlay could help Arlington to attract other affordable housing organizations who have not worked in Arlington before, or it could allow the HCA or AHA to partner with other organizations to increase their rate of affordable housing production. Adopting this proposal might result in seeing an affordable housing development in Arlington getting subsidy maybe every 2 to 3 years instead of every 5 years, and that would be a doubling of the current rate. Because as Erica said, building affordable housing is hard no matter what. Even if we make this part easy, there will still be other challenges. So under this proposal, what would qualify as affordable housing? Projects would only be allowed under this proposal if 70% of the units were for and affordable to households with incomes at 60% or below of area median income, if we're talking about a rental project, or 70% of area median income if we're talking about home ownership. This uses the current affordable housing AMI limits that already exist in our zoning code for inclusionary zoning and other purposes. The rental limit aligns, and this is crucial, with the federal and state housing tax credit limits. And the AMI numbers, right, come from Department of Housing and Urban Development. So this is deeper income targeting than is required by the Community Preservation Act. And separate from this overlay, state and federal subsidy programs that most of these kind of projects would be looking for require at least 13% of the units to be at 30% of AMI. So that's extremely low income. So why require 70%? Some of you might be wondering, why 70%? Maybe why not 100%? And a high percentage of affordability is fundamental, but we do propose leaving room for income mixing, and there's 4 main reasons for that. The first one is inclusion, right? Workforce and market rate homes. We want people of all incomes to live together, and we don't. Yes, so that's really important. I think guiding principle for us. Missing middle and workforce housing is also a shortage that the town has, and is part of plans and documents that the town is pursuing. And so ending up with some of those units as well is great. Cross subsidy. So in some cases, market rate homes can actually partially subsidize the cost of affordable homes, either reducing the public subsidy needed or making it possible to build more affordable homes. And the last reason is actually quite key, avoiding displacement. So when we convert an existing building to affordable, or not we, when an affordable housing developer converts an existing building to affordable, we don't want to immediately displace any over-income resident who might be living there, right? We want people to be able to live in their homes. And so giving some of that flexibility means that those kind of projects are possible as well. So where would the affordable housing overlay apply? And the short answer is anywhere. It's appropriate in any neighborhood in Arlington. It would apply to all residential, commercial, and industrial districts. And then right, what's important is the height and the setbacks and mixed use or business uses would be based on the underlying zoning. So you couldn't build a mixed use building in a current residential zone. And of course, lots zoned as open space would not be eligible. And you can see here, part of the reason we're talking about putting it everywhere is most American communities have a history of only allowing affordable housing in less desirable areas, including Arlington. And I say less desirable, that's yes. So what sort of dimensional flexibility would be available, right? We want to make sure that it works, right? The finances work. As Erica said, building, getting access to those subsidies usually takes about 30 to 40 units on the smaller end. So we're offering the following flexibility for affordable housing. So building height, 2 additional stories will be allowed over the base zoning, over what's otherwise allowed. So that changes depending on the neighborhood that you're in, right? The homes per lot, there will be no limit. And that's actually really key, going back to allowing a variety of unit sizes, right? When we have a limit on homes per lot, it encourages larger units, and which is not, I think, really what we're looking for. We're looking for a mix. Other requirements that would limit the number of homes that might fit in the same footprint would be waived. such as floor area ratio, lot area per dwelling unit, usable landscape open space, minimum lot area, etc. But there would be no changes to the following: minimum setbacks, building facade step backs. All uses that are previously permitted in any underlying zoning would still be permitted. There'd be no change to environmental regulations like stormwater management, specialized stretch code, our fossil fuel free building bylaw, and all building code requirements and accessibility requirements would remain. That's that. Let's talk about our business districts. And so mixed use with first floor commercial under this proposal would be required in our core business districts. And what we mean by that is the B3 and B5, which correspond to Capitol Square, the center, and the Heights business areas. You can see them on the map here highlighted in colors. Mixed use projects would be allowed in other underlying business and industrial zoning, but would not be required. So in terms of sustainability and climate resiliency requirements, the existing local requirements would continue to apply. Street tree planting is part of our zoning bylaw and would continue to apply. Stormwater management bylaw is separate from zoning. The specialized stretch energy code, which requires high performance building, and our fossil fuel free building bylaw, which has recently gone into effect, would definitely apply and require all new construction and major renovations to be fossil fuel free. And the state and federal subsidy programs, I think Erica already covered this in great detail, so I won't belabor the point here, but they do have a number of principles that they are really looking for and prioritizing in who they choose to fund. And so you really have to include those in order to be considered for funding. Parking requirements. So besides the environmental toll of parking, right, it actually is a really huge cost burden for building any kind of housing, and especially affordable housing. So this proposal would require 1 parking space for every 2 units, which is in line with the current parking utilization at HCA properties. Projects would be allowed to include more than the minimum parking if that's what they felt was needed for an individual project. Site plan review, right? So an opportunity for community input. It's important, when we're adding significant properties like this to get the input of the community. And so the way that would happen here, it would be through site plan review at the Arlington Redevelopment Board. It's an administrative process which provides the ARB and members of the public an opportunity to review and comment. And then site plan review in Arlington is based on the materials that the ARB also uses for environmental design review. And there's a whole list right there, which I won't read at you. Yes. So let's come back and summarize. I've covered a lot of information in a very short amount of time here, right? So an affordable housing overlay for Arlington would require 70% of rental units restricted as affordable, and the maximum income would be 60% of area median income, 70% if you were working on an ownership project. Mixed use projects are allowed in the business industrial districts and required in the B3, B5 commercial centers. And actually, one thing I didn't cover on that slide is the reality is building a mixed use affordable housing development is very challenging. And Erica can talk even more about that because they've managed to do it in one of their buildings, but it requires finding exactly the right partner because, first the commercial space that is in there is the affordable housing organization is on the hook for paying for that space. And, if they don't have a tenant, they lose money. And that takes away from their overall mission if and when that happens. So you have to have a really stable relationship there. Otherwise, that kind of risk is really going to not be acceptable for an affordable housing organization. I forgot to mention that on the business district slides. So all industrial, residential, and business districts would be eligible for the affordable housing overlay. Additional height, no change to setbacks and minimum yards. No change to building facade or step back requirements. One space for 2 dwelling units, and by right, subject to site plan review. Okay, and with that, Sarah, are you back? Is Sarah able to rejoin? Oh, you are here.
Can
Okay,
you hear
great.
me? I'm
Yes,
here.
you're here. Okay.
So sorry about that.
No worries.
But I'm here. So so that was the presentation. I am sure that even though folks haven't been putting questions in the chat, I'm sure there are likely to be some questions. So, you know, if anybody has any, there's a raise your hand tool that you can feel more than welcome to use. And I see our first person, Winnell Evans. Winnell, can you unmute?
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. Hi, Winnell Evans, Orchard Place Town Meeting Member, Precinct 14. If we are going to allow structures that are 2 stories over the underlying zoning, that means 4.5 stories in our residential districts. I live right across the street from the majestic 40B project on Mass Ave, which is going to be 5 stories. And I'm just kind of having a hard time imagining 4.5 stories on non-conforming lots such as mine, for instance, which is only 3,800 square feet, as are most of the lots on my narrow little dead end. So how are we imagining East Arlington, for instance, where there are many, many non-conforming lots? How are we imagining that 4.5 story structures are going to work there? Is there a possibility maybe of visualizations to help us kind of see what this might mean?
Sure, we can think about providing visualizations. I think, you know, what the reality is, right? In order to make affordable housing work, right, we need to be able to build slightly bigger buildings than what's allowed today. And you know, if you think about what's allowed on a the kind of housing that we're getting in the zones that you're talking about today, right? It tends to be larger, what I might refer to as a McMansion, right? And so if we can instead end up with a number of smaller units instead of one gigantic or 2 gigantic ones, and have those be income restricted, I think that's a great win for Arlington. So. I saw there was a question in the chat too about how MBTA communities could or could not help in terms of this. I think, you know, one thing to note is that the MBTA communities overlay only applies to a very small number of lots, particularly, and they're all currently residential. And so, you know, talking about that principle of wanting to allow affordable housing throughout town. You know, that's one of the main things. And also, you know, here we're talking about a much higher level of affordability.
But Sanjay, this is Chuck. I can't find the raise the hand tool. But do you have any estimate of what the MBTA plan would provide for affordable housing? Because I know there's a lot of discussion in the MBTA community meetings about the affordable housing, the increased affordable housing incentive.
I don't have a number for you, Chuck. I think you and we can talk offline. Let's talk about the overlay here. You know.
Well, we just passed the MBTA overlay. So wondering,
but yeah, okay, go ahead, Sarah.
I can provide just a little. So the MBTA communities overlay is really, it's focused on housing, right? Just building housing. It's not necessarily focused on affordable. You know, obviously having an opportunity to build 6 units or more to create that affordable housing unit with it would be great, but the MBTA communities is really focused on just increasing the number of housing units that are available in the community.
Has affordable housing components in it.
Right, it does,
Yep.
but only if you are building equal to what would trigger the inclusionary zoning bylaw, which is 6 units or above. So,
There is also a bonus, right? Again, yeah.
Bonus.
So Chuck, we got lots of questions. Right?
Parent should recognize that that is a tool for you as well. So you should be transparent and mention that as a tool as you're going through your presentations.
Sure.
the
A couple
next
other. Oh,
question,
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
sorry, Michelle Nathan, your hand up. Oops, I think you might be muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
They were on two different devices and I had a little problem. So my question is largely the same as a number of the ones in the chat and the prior question. But I also have a comment related to what Chuck was saying, which is that it does seem like there is a connection here that we could meet both needs, both the transportation needs and the affordable housing needs to some extent by looking at the two overlays together. But the question is still the question that I had is that it seems like on the one hand, the statement that the zoning laws will not change, but the zoning laws have to change to be able to allow a change in setbacks, for instance, to the lot size. If you're going to build up 2 stories, the lot size to property size ratios are going to change. And so it does change, and that those two things seem to be in conflict. That's my question.
And also in all residential.
I don't think we said that zoning
Question.
won't change, right? I'm going to bring the slide back to make sure we are clear about what is and isn't changing, right? In terms of dimensional flexibility, right? So there is no change to minimum setbacks, step backs, or uses, which is a term in zoning about what things can be. And there's no change to environmental regulations. We are explicitly saying that other requirements that limit the number of homes that fit in the same footprint would be changed under this proposal.
I misunderstood that. I thought you were mentioning
that's
the
okay. That's why we're
area
asking
ratios is
questions.
the same thing. Thank you.
I still have a question.
That's fine.
Are you
Okay. So our next question is Carl Wagner.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes,
can
go
hear
blue,
you.
Carl.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, Sanjay. I'm a town meeting member and I live on Edge Hill Road. I've been concerned about the town making changes that the public are not aware of or on board with. And in the MBTA density overlay process, at least there was a public working group. Some of the members on, I think, this private group were on that public group. Sanjay, I think you're one of those people. The problem that we have is that with 75 people on a call in a public information session, we're talking about the largest changes Arlington has ever seen. We're talking about erosion of our commercial base potentially by allowing residential through the commercial. And I think we're talking about 60-foot buildings throughout single and 2-family zoning, effectively killing single and 2-family. So I would ask you, do you remember that in 2019, the town came before the town meeting, 250 people, and apologized in a public process for not involving the public enough in the changes they were going to make to commercial zoning. And they said they would never make zoning changes without involving the town meeting members and the public, the 43,000 people who made the largest investment of their lives or are spending a lot of money to rent in single, 2-family, or multifamily. This process is a private group, which I believe is illegal, actually, because it's making deliberative changes that are proposed to a public body, the Housing Trust Fund, or to the Select Board. And I think even if it's not illegal, it's been argued by the town council, this is not illegal what you're doing. It's immoral if you don't involve a huge portion of the people who pay the taxes of the people on this call and the volunteers. This is a town talking about changes that will take us from a town to an urban environment. And I don't want 60-foot buildings. I want affordability, but there is a trade-off in everything we have in our neighborhoods. Livability, affordability, cars, not cars. I'm incredibly concerned that I don't want to lose what we have that's good in a town that brought me here, simply so we can give developers gifts to make 40-unit or 75-unit buildings in our single and two family zones and kill our business zones. This is wrong, and the public needs to be involved. Otherwise, it's immoral, if not illegal. Thank you.
Well, I'm pleased that we're here having a public conversation tonight, Carl. And this, private group has also presented previously to both the trust fund and to the redevelopment board. Obviously, if right for this to pass, it would have to come again to the redevelopment board and certainly in front of town meeting. So we can't make decisions, but we have we're here to provide a proposal for people to react to. So
Could I ask
Annie
a
Laporte,
question?
I see, if you want to raise your hand, I have a group of people that are in line right now. Annie
I've
Laporte?
tried, I couldn't get into Zoom and I'm by telephone. This is the problem when you have this last minute.
Okay, I'm sorry,
like-
I'm sorry, I can't see who's speaking here, but I can
I'm calling
call.
in by phone and I'm just frustrated that I can't see what the presentation is or what the details are. We should have the public and
Would you
have
like
many
to-
public.
I can
Thank
email you
you.
the link, or I can email you the presentation, or.
Why is
and
this so
certainly-
private? What's the whole, what is this? Why is this secret? Why is this whole plan secret by a secret group that nobody in the town knows about? This is going to impact everyone. And like the previous caller said, it's going to impact the commercial tax base. We have a small commercial tax base. If you make it so that it shifts to even more residential, we could be in real financial trouble. So this really impacts everyone in the town. I'm just frustrated. I can't even get onto Zoom. I do 10 Zooms a day and I couldn't get into this Zoom.
Rebecca Gruber?
No, actually, I took my hand down, but if you don't mind.
Oh, Annie, yes, Annie, please.
So I want to ask a couple of questions about the financing of these projects. Okay, so we've used the term pencil out, and I just think that's maybe a little bit of a technical term, and what we should really talk about is, what pencil out means. I mean, what you're talking about is by the time we add up all the costs and we add up the operating costs and the resulting mortgage and the rate at which everybody who has an interest in this has to get paid back, will the rents cover the cost? Correct?
yes, that's what we mean by pencil out. Yes.
So when we're penciling, so that's a very shorthand term for something that is a big deal for any business. The other question that I have, this is also maybe a technical question, and maybe this problem has been solved, but the last time I dealt with housing projects like this, a project like Sunnyside has to cash flow on its own. So in other words, if the HCA has a portfolio of properties and some of them are making more money and one of them is losing a little bit of money, and that property is Sunnyside, okay, they're in trouble with their funders because Sunnyside has to cash flow internally. Eric, is that still true?
Yes, a different development can't sort of subsidize another development. If Sunnyside's doing great and our Downing Square Broadway initiative is suffering, we can't throw some money over there from the Sunnyside project.
Right. So you can't really manage your whole portfolio as cash flowing. Each property has to cash flow.
That's right. They have their own financing sources and their own budgets. Yep.
So what I'm trying to point out to people here is that this idea of how difficult it is to finance affordable housing and how delicate that financing is a super important thing to keep in mind. Okay, this is part of why building affordable housing is so slow, and it's part of why reducing the cost, the upfront costs, the soft costs is a huge boon to getting more affordable housing. So I just thought that was kind of an important thing to mention. I could go on and talk about taxes, but I'll let somebody else ask a question first.
Okay, Rebecca.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I am particularly struck by the size of the development that needs to be built for the penciling out that Annie just discussed, 30 to 40 units. I've lived in Arlington for 30 years. When I think about where that size development could occur, there's, maybe a couple handfuls of locations that if they were to turn over, then possibly they would be a good site for this kind of development. My concern is if they turn over and we don't have an affordable housing overlay in place that facilitates an affordable housing developer to build on these sites, instead what will be built is very expensive luxury units that won't result in the kind of income and community diversity that we, as long as I've lived in Arlington, have advocated for. So when the working group who put together this proposal for an overlay, which I very much appreciate you doing all this detailed thinking, was considering the idea that the overlay should be in all of Arlington, what was your perspective about where there actually would be projects like this? I mean, I've been following the Housing Corporation of Arlington. Thank you very much for all the work you're doing. You found 3 locations in the last 15 years that worked size-wise and that you were able to get funding for. I just don't envision all of a sudden there being lots and lots and lots of new housing development happening in town, whether it be affordable, which would be more desirable to me, or commercial market rate expensive gentrification of Arlington.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point in that there are different parts of how this might work, right? For the deep subsidy kind of projects that we're talking about 30 or 40 units, and you're not going to find parcels of the right size to do that in most of the R1, R2 areas, or R3 areas, right? And again, right, I would go back to that slide at the very beginning talking about what does success look like here, and it's going from making 30 to 40 units once every 5 years to making 30 to 40 units right once every 2 or 3 years. Maybe or maybe finding something even bigger if the right site happened to be available. In terms of the kinds of projects that might happen on some of those smaller lots, right? You can look at some of the innovative things that HCA has done over the years. Especially you could think about the ADU project that they just did on Dorothy Road, if I remember correctly. I've biked by it a number of times, and those are the sorts of smaller scale projects that probably another developer is not going to come in and do, but HCA might be able to do things like that if we make the permitting process for them easier.
Okay, next on the list, I see Kristen Anderson.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the presentation and for your work here. The housing situation is ridiculous, and I appreciate your effort to address it. So my name is Kristen Anderson. I run a business in the Heights, and I'm very happy to be able to live and work in the town of Arlington. I love it here. But my own situation is unusual because there are not many businesses in town. There's not much space for businesses in town, and for more than 50 years, the town has been permanently losing businesses. Presently, 85% of the land in Arlington is zoned for housing use, while only 6% of the land in town is zoned for business use, and the commercial and industrial zones a fraction of that is actually available for use by businesses, as much of that space has been redeveloped for housing. I have two questions for you tonight. I understand that these are slightly technical and you may not have the answers right away. So I would be happy to get this information from you good folks in the future. My two questions are, how many feet of space that are zoned for business use are actually used by businesses in town? And how many feet of space for businesses, commercial and industrial, does this overlay protect for business use? Because we have seen an erosion of space for businesses in mixed use development. My concern here is that if you allow developers to redevelop space that is currently used by businesses, we will lose businesses, existing and future, and we'll lose space for businesses. I think protections are needed, and I'd very much like to see commercial and industrial space removed from the housing overlay. But those are my two questions. Are they pretty clear?
Yes, I don't have answers right that
I didn't
specific math problems. Yes,
I didn't think you would have that, but I think those are good things to be thinking about and good questions to be asking, and especially, you know, how many feet of space for businesses, commercial and industrial, does this overlay protect? You know, that's the thing that I'd really like to know. Thank you.
Okay. Our next question is Steve Ravlak, or comment.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's actually, I wanted to answer, I happen to know the answer to a question that was asked earlier, so I'd like to give it. I forget who asked, but it was the gist was, how much affordable housing could we get from MBTA communities? And when working on the district, we estimated that MBTA communities would produce a maximum of 200 dwellings in 10 years. That was sort of like the upper limit. And at a 15% requirement, that would be 30 affordable units if every MBTA community project had at least 6 or more dwellings. To date, there has only been one MBTA community project, and it was lower than 6. Thank you.
Steve, what about the incentive?
It has not been used.
But there's no projection for the bonus then.
There's the projection, so the estimate of 200 included took the projection into account. So I'm simply taking 15% of the projection.
Okay, I just thought the 25% might, the additional floor for the 25% might generate more.
It's possible, but I think the scale that we expect is pretty small based on where it is. And yeah.
Okay. Next question comes from JP Lewicky.
Thank you. So first of all, apologies if this was already answered. I joined a little bit late because I was getting dinner for my family. But I guess I was just wondering, how many developers are there who kind of even specialize in doing this? Is this like, is the sort of thing where there's like 100 ready to kind of like start working, or is it like this is a very specialist thing that only a few do? Like, how many projects are usually working on? That kind of question. Like what kind of uptake are we likely to see?
So there is currently only in Arlington, there is currently only the Housing Corporation of Arlington who has done this work, right? And I think, you know, we talked quite a bit about what they have managed to do. And the explicit goal would be to maybe attract somebody else to do that. Erica might know more about how many of those kind of developers we have in Massachusetts. The kind of folks who might be working in an adjoining community and might be interested in considering Arlington. Erica, I don't know if you know.
I mean, I have no idea offhand the number, and there's a lot of organizations like HCA, Community Development Corporations, that are very place-based that don't go to other places, but there's a lot of larger regional organizations. So some examples you could look at their websites are the Community Builders, or POA, Preservation of Affordable Housing, or Two Life Communities, which mostly does senior housing. Those are all nonprofits. There's also some for-profits that they do market rate buildings, but they also do this kind of affordable housing. Beacon Properties and Trinity Financial are two examples. So they all work regionally. They all work in Greater Boston. Those are examples of the kinds of organizations that might be interested in Arlington if the context was a little different.
Thank you. Kind of any sense of like roughly how many projects a year they might. I know it's very hard. Like you gotta. Yeah,
I have no idea, but they are all the ones I mentioned are very large, very well-established organizations. How many projects they're working on at one time, I don't know, but they do a lot of projects throughout a lot of communities. So yeah, if you went to their websites, you could probably get a sense. But yeah.
And I think to sort of the question you sort of seem to be asking is how many of these projects could we expect to see, right? And we went through and looked at the LIHTC program that Erica mentioned earlier, right, which is the main way that a lot of these programs get built. And there are, I think, only 5 communities in the Commonwealth who've managed to average 1 project per year. I think it was like Boston, Worcester, Springfield, and 2 others that I'm forgetting. And so, the idea that we would be able to get, we're trying to get from 1 every 5 years to 1 every 2 to 3 years, right? That's the kind of scale of change we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it is a little reassuring just to know that it's not that every property that gets zoned into this is going to pop up within a year or two. That is kind of a gradual pace of change and kind of a few projects around town mixed in with the existing buildings. Thank you.
Oh, did we lose Sarah again?
Oh, there we are. Sorry, Anton, you're next.
Hi. Am I speaking?
I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, great. So first of all, I'd like to express my that I'm happy that you did this work, and I do overall like the project. It's definitely an improvement over the current status, and hopefully we can get something out of it and improve it later and see how it works to tweak it. I have a question though about the numbers you presented. So for example, on 10 Sunnyside, the numbers you say is like 33 million and it's 43 units. Is it 33 million whole project and 43 units is also whole project, or there is some other units that are not affordable and the price of a whole project is higher?
That's just for 10 Sunnyside Ave, and that's the entire project. It's going to be $33 million. It's very expensive per unit, $33 million for the entire 10 Sunnyside Ave project. And at the end of the day, we'll have 43 affordable apartments and a community room and a little roof deck and some parking. Yeah.
So it's basically 100% affordable.
Yes, that's right.
I see. Yeah, it's expensive to build here. But yeah, thank you for trying hard, and I appreciate that we have such projects.
Next, we have John Hickman.
Hi. Yes, thanks to the presenters for all the work you've put into this project. I have a concern about the difference between the home ownership and the rental properties. Under this proposal, the 70% of area median income limit is higher for home ownership than the 60% for rental. And it seems to me that homeownership is a less targeted subsidy, because if you move into a homeownership project and your income goes up, you can continue to live in that project, in that home for 20 years or more, and pay the subsidized mortgage, even no matter how high your income goes up. It seems to me we should be encouraging rental projects, not homeownership projects, and there should not be a more favorable income limit for homeowners under this proposal.
I'm not the expert to talk about this, but and so Erica, feel free to jump in if you have other thoughts. But my understanding of the reason why that home ownership number is higher than the rental one is because I think that the programs have found over time that in order to have long-term success, they need a slightly higher income limit in order to see long-term success of those homeownership units, right? So making sure that the homeowners are able to be in a successfully able to take on homeownership and be successful at that.
Well, to me, that just
I would agree with that, and I would add to that also that it's a maximum, right? So it's also when you're setting the prices for these affordable units, that just gives more flexibility to set a price that might be affordable. You could set the price that's affordable to a household at 60% AMI, but those who are qualified could be qualified and have incomes up to 70% AMI. And for ownership, there is more of a demand of people who do have slightly more income, for everything Sanjay was saying, that at slightly higher incomes, you might be more likely to have a steady income that will enable you to be successful over time. But I think it gives more flexibility in setting a price and having a wider set of people who can qualify.
But it does sound like it's not only a less targeted subsidy, but it's a more expensive subsidy. So it just seems to me that we shouldn't be really focusing on homeownership projects, and we should really not be giving favorable treatment to them. But so I would just encourage you to think about that. Thank you.
Okay, next up I have Rebecca Peterson.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rebecca Peterson. I'm a town meeting member, and I don't have a question. I just have a couple of comments. I feel that these height ranges are far too high for residential neighborhoods. If I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like within the given setbacks, you could have multiple buildings or one enormous building that's 4 or 4.5 stories high on a single family lot. That would effectively block neighbors from sunlight. That would block yards from shade, as many trees would be torn down. And frankly, I feel like that would block people from a lot of enjoyment of their own property. I also think that only having 1 parking space per every 2 units is a fantasy, as shown by the number of cars to residents ratio in the Downing Square buildings. And I just, I want to say that we didn't move here so that we could live in Davis Square or something, along those lines. We moved here so we could live in a neighborhood with grass and trees and, some level of peace and quiet. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Next up I have Grant Cook.
Hi, Grant Cook. I live in the Heights. The question about, it seems like, just confirming here, that the necessity of this and having it apply to the whole town is you guys need to access for what you want to do with these dozens of unit buildings that have to be that volume to make them work and justify the economics, is you need large lots, right? You need 16, 30, 40,000 foot lots, to get a space that could handle this kind of project, correct? And those are all over town?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yes.
Okay, so where I live, for example, across the street from me is the Jermaine Lawrence campus, which is about 60,000 square feet. It's currently zoned single family. Now, I don't think McLean is going to leave anytime soon, but if they did, to build a bunch of single family homes on that parcel would be lunacy with the needs of today's affordable housing. So let's say a complex were to go there. We already have tall buildings there. It's a school. They're already practically 3 or 4 stories, or they seem that way. But today, if that parcel popped onto the market with how it's zoned, could HCA access it at all, or what would this overlay do to allow someone like HCA to access that parcel that's not available today?
I think, you know, I don't know the specifics of the parcel you're talking about, but generally the idea is, right, it would give an organization like the HCA certainty about, you know, what they could and could not build there, right? You know, the way that HCA has built up until now, right, is through 40B, and you know, there's pros and cons to that, but you know, it is ultimately a you know, uncertain process going into it, and so this would be providing more certainty about that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, and this is about affordable housing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think the important. We've always said we want affordable housing. If we want affordable housing, but it has to look like a single family home, then maybe we really don't want affordable housing. So I guess we ought to be clear about our priorities. So thank you.
Hey, Marina, are you ready? Marina Popova.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Marina Popova. I have two questions. So my first question is, I'm not clear about their like the setbacks, because on one of the slides you said that there will be no requirements for, that there will be no changes in the yards and setbacks requirements, but then on the other slide, it was saying that you will be waiving all the requirements for, you know, for the current like dimensional and, you know, like, you know, open space requirements. So which one is it? You know, are we going to be able to preserve the setbacks for trees and stuff or not?
So we can go back to that slide again, right? Let me go back here. Where is it here? Right. So the things that do not change are setbacks and the building facade step backs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Other dimensional requirements would, you know, like floor area ratio and lot per dwelling unit, and the misleadingly named usable open space, right? Those are the kinds of things we're talking about waiving.
Okay,
so
so
the things
there will
that
be no
limit the number.
requirement for open space, right?
But I mean, setback is right. It is a requirement for open space.
Okay, so my
So
second question then is, you know, if you are going to, so is it going to be possible, for example, to combine two single family lots to build like something like what you just were describing that makes the most financial, you know, sense, like 40 to 75 unit, you know, like a large building. So is it going to be possible after this change?
is it going to be
To buy
possible
two single family lots, for example, combine them and build like a 70 unit apartment building there?
Well, most single family lots, even if you combined two of them, would not be nearly big enough to you know, build 30 or 40 or 50 units, right? Most single family lots, even if you got, you know, there's a wide variety of single family lots across town, right? But you know, on a single family lot, the most you'd probably be talking about, maybe if it was a really big one, you'd be talking about like a 6-unit building. But you know, again, there is a wide variety of sizes of lots.
But basically it's
But to
allowed,
your
right?
question about aggregation, right? Could you purchase two lots that are next to each other and build under the affordable housing overlay? And the answer to that is yes.
Okay. So then the next one was about the parking, because I also agree that, you know, like requirement of one parking for 2 units, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I think that pretty much everyone who is on the poll right now has at least one car. And if you have a family and you have to care for kids or family members, anyone, you probably will need 2 cars in the family. So, I mean, what that means is that the people will have to start flooding their cars into the neighborhood streets. So why would you consider such a requirement then? Because it's really going to be a very detrimental effect on the neighborhood.
Right. So the other thing that I would say about parking, right, is when we require it, right, the housing, organization, affordable housing organization has no choice, right? That even if they're not going to use it, they have to provide it, and that is a very large financial overhead. So every time that we require a parking space that's not going to be used, right, that means less housing, and that means, frankly, projects that don't happen. And so we want to make sure we're only, we're requiring the amount of parking that, reasonably is going to be expected. And we worked with Erica and talked to other folks, right, to understand actual parking utilization numbers for affordable housing. And it tends to be, there are plenty of people in affordable housing who have cars, but there are also people who don't. And that's going to be site dependent, right? Something that's being built along Mass Ave is, or someplace that's transit accessible is going to be different than something that might be built further away from transit in terms of their needs.
Okay, thank you.
I see Michelle Nathan, you're back again.
Okay, hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, we're doing two devices, so I apologize. So I don't feel so relatively new in town anymore, but I've been here 5 years and I try to keep up. And I always feel like I'm trying to play catch up with this town in terms of, and I do try to read and I talk to people and try to, keep up as best I can. But I always feel frustrated because I'm always playing catch up. So for instance, this is the first time I've heard about this meeting. I know you guys are limited with time, so you have to be really fast. There's a lot of details and terminology and concepts, and it's almost like watching a movie in, fast motion, as opposed to slow motion where you have a conversation, you're explaining things a little bit more, in the moment, and people have questions about the slides, so you're able to explain, the terminology, the concepts. And when I was in Winchester, I don't know why, well, I think I know why, it was much more apparent what was going on. There was a lot more working groups, a lot more inclusive. The citizens, would be notified as to what's going on. And, we'd have big meetings like with housing. And, we knew who the players were, who their interests. In this town, it always seems like you gotta have been born here to understand what's going on. And so I would just encourage you to, send emails out to everybody in town and take more time, have public meetings. I tried to be a town meeting member, and I lasted, 1 year because it was the same frustration. You found out things at the last minute. And the meeting was a lot of questions during the voting process, and you didn't know who the people were. You didn't always understand the concepts. And so I just feel like I would like to be involved and be helpful, but the way it's set up, it feels very frustrating. So
Well, I'm glad you made it tonight. Did you have any questions about what we talked about tonight that you wanted to ask?
yes, my
to have that
question is the question is, why is it so hard to get on board with all these, not just this proposal, but let's talk about this one. It's hard to jump in at the last minute and contribute. And, were emails sent out to all the town meeting members? Did I miss something? Because 75 people, asking questions and making decisions is pretty small for a town of this size.
Well, we're not here making
So that-
decisions, but we are here talking
no.
about stuff.
No, I understand, but my question is, can it be made more inclusive to include other people, to have, you know, more open meetings where people find out about this as opposed to last minute? And it's, you know, you're always playing catch up. That's my question. How can it be better?
It's
Done in a way to be more
a perennial question of outreach, for sure.
Yeah, it's
but
just
I would say, you know, this meeting has been posted on the town website for weeks, if not a month or two, and so, you know, there has been, you know, outreach done about it happening, and you know, we're still quite a ways from town meeting happening. So,
and can it be sent? Can an email be sent out so people actually see it? You guys must have emails of the residents that, you know, some, like when they make calls about, you know, your water is going to be brown for the week. There's got to be a way to be more inclusive.
well, yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah, well, I'm I'm not part of the town, right? So I can't send emails to all the residents.
Okay, well, that would be my encouragement. So I think there's too many people like me that are always playing catch up. Like my neighbors, I don't think anybody knows about this, you know, or there'd probably be more people here. I just feel frustrated.
Oh, did we lose Sarah? I think David Brecht had his hand up next. But since I
Yeah,
don't see
Sanjay.
it
Yeah,
here-
it's David Reck here. Hi. Thanks everyone for doing all this stuff and putting these slides together and everything. I just had a question. It's, I guess, more of a statement than a question, but it was to kind of follow up on what someone had said a little while ago about just what a 5-story building would look like in a lot of the neighborhoods as you go back into the neighborhoods. I understand the point about lot sizes, practically speaking. But I'll just throw out an example. You know, this is obviously a hilly town. And for example, my uphill, I live on a hill. My uphill neighbor is 1 floor above me. So my second floor looks straight into my neighbor's first floor, or we're at the same level. So effectively, if hypothetically anything ever happened with a couple of lots and you put a 5-story building on that, that would be 6 stories relative to my house. I'm not unusual. I think a lot of other people in the same exact situation as far as being on hills and just what things look like, framing it for the neighborhood. I hear your point about, okay, well, practically speaking, you'd have to have, say, 30 units. That would be a certain number of square feet. I understand that a lot of lots, you know, you'd have to almost like double, maybe even triple up some of the lots depending on where you are in town. But I think, you know, the one thing I would just say as this whole idea is going through, and I certainly understand the concept of why there is this proposal and obviously the need for affordable housing, clearly. But certainly I think that people want to at least have some sense of control over not having experiments done on their neighborhood. I guess that's the one thing. And just, you know, what is in their backyard about, like, okay, if I have solar panels, are my solar panels now going to be just simply useless? Are my trees, is my garden going to die because now I'm just under someone's shade? It's just a comment. It's a comment. I don't really know.
Sure.
It's not really a question.
Yeah, and I would say, right, that those aren't certainties that we get in life, no matter what we do with zoning, right? Like, but anyway, yeah.
Okay.
If Sarah's not there, I think I saw Susan Stamps, and then maybe Andy Greenspan. Susan, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Sanjay. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I feel like I'm pretty educated about 40B and MBTA communities. And I'm trying to wrap my head around how is the affordable housing overlay different? What and where will it allow housing that MBTA communities doesn't and is different from 40B? I think of 40B as, well, for example, the Mugar property. You know, the project is a 40B. The neighborhood has been objecting to it for years because it's in a flood zone, et cetera. And they're basically able to override all the local extra protections, land protections, because it's state law 40B, and that's what the law says. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, the affordable housing overlay would that be like the overlay would be like all 40B, so that
No, so yeah,
okay.
I get your question, right? Your question is, how is this different from those two things that we already have, right? And the main way that the main way that this is different is the high level of affordability that's required, right? So you know, this here we're talking about building 70% of units, right, for people at 60% AMI and lower, right? I think, you know, 40B can be used in a variety of ways, right? So you can use 40B to build, you know, that kind of housing, but that's not, you know, the particular project you mentioned, right, was not proposing that kind of affordability, right? I think, you know, I think maybe 25% of units, and I think at 80% of AMI or something like that, right? So we're talking about, you know, a high level of affordability and deep affordability. So that's sort of how it's different from that. And in terms of MBTA communities only touched a very small number of lots, right? And and so, you know, does this provide that much advantage in those particular lots that are already part of MBTA communities? Maybe not, right? I think, you know, an affordable housing developer might be able to use MBTA communities zoning, but again, MBTA communities was about housing writ large, not you know, necessarily affordable housing. There were some bonuses there, which you know, hopefully we will see people take advantage of, but this is giving much more possibility, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is zoning is only part of it. You know, you know, on that developer slide, if we went all the way back there, right? Developers need sites, they need financing, and they need permitting, right? And so, you know, if we make the permitting part easier, they still have to find sites. And so if we've only zoned, you know, very small pockets of town to allow for affordable housing, right, then there won't be, you know, sites come up, you know.
Well, I might be misunderstanding, but haven't there been various 40B projects along Mass Ave, even though they're not necessarily, like, for example, take the former Torreya block across from the high school, which was a commercial block. It had like 5 or 6 businesses in a row, little stores, retail stores in a block in a row. It was purchased by a developer. It was developed as a 40B, I think. And it was not?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, well then, okay. I guess I misunderstood. I thought that was why they were able to take this commercial property and basically turn it into something that was like 95% housing. I could be wrong. If Kristen Anderson is still on the call, she might be able to clarify. I could be wrong. But I think that's what people are concerned about is gobbling up commercial and the small amount of commercial industrial property that we have. And also, I think I haven't ever talked to anybody in town who is not very supportive of providing housing at all the lower income levels. I think, I know I feel really badly that only people with quite a bit of money can move it to Arlington now. I think the concern has been that we don't want like these big buildings in the middle of our residential neighborhoods and maybe popping up huge buildings in the middle of a sort of a boutique retail block. And maybe these would be fine. And I definitely don't want to be NIMBY. But I guess I'm just trying to get a handle on, is this, when I think that when the affordable housing overlay was first proposed, it was along the major corridors, and now it's developed into everywhere in town is the overlay, unless, if I understand correctly. And so I'm just wondering, does that mean that to exaggerate, that 15-story buildings can pop up on Beverly Road,
No.
up by the Mystic Lakes? So I think that's what, I know that's what I'm concerned about, and
Sure.
maybe other people are. Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is no. No,
Oh,
nowhere
well then
would
why not? Because isn't that what you said, everywhere? And they could go 4 to 6 stories?
You just said 15, right? No,
Oh, okay,
15,
all right,
we don't
you're
allow
right.
15 stories
Okay,
anywhere
I
in
did say
Arlington.
15, yeah. Okay,
Right.
call it 5. Yeah.
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 Right. The height, the different heights are different according to the underlying zoning, right? So.
Okay.
So,
well, maybe if it would be nice to see, it was so helpful to see the development of the ideas of the MBTA Communities Working Group. So maybe it would be nice to open up your working group meetings on this. It might help educate more of us, so we can help to spread the word and help to support. Just a thought.
Sure.
Andy,
oh, Sarah, you're back. Great. Oh, I don't hear you. Andrew Green, maybe since we can't hear Sarah, Andrew Greenspan, I think, was the next hand I had seen. And then it is 7:40. I think we'll probably take, actually, I think Andrew is the last one I think we haven't heard from. And so we'll maybe take that question and then we'll be done.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just want to actually thank Sanjay and all the folks who spent time working on this. This is a very thorough presentation and took, into account a lot of details. And this is not an easy thing. And I'm pretty sure most of these people are volunteers. As someone who put together a much smaller warrant article last year, it takes lots of time and energy to outreach to people and do all of these types of things. So I encourage everyone who is at this meeting, if they, want other people to be aware of these things, to tell their neighbors and to provide suggestions that you have in this meeting, and we can iterate this and, improve it even more. So thanks.
Great. Thank you. And I think Sarah's been having trouble with her end of the connection here. So I guess it'll sort of fall to me to thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to the presentation and considering the proposal that we're putting forward here. We'll look forward to continuing this conversation as we move forward. And thank you again for taking the time and for sharing your ideas and for coming out. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.